In this video, we're going to implement a admin user, but before we do that, I forgot in the last video, I forgot to add in all of our changes to version control. So I'm going to say git add and ci-m and say add devise for auth. And now I hit get push, and that's going to kind of give us a placeholder in time. So if we ever have to switch back to that commit, then we can. Essentially, anytime you create a new feature, which in the case of these videos is every time that we have a video, we're going to want to push it up. So sometimes I will forget though, so I just remembered as soon as I hit stop record on the last one. So now to create an admin user. Before we do this, I'm going to take a step back and talk about STI, and this is more commonly referred to as single table inheritance. And what it's essentially going to allow us to do is if I open up our schema file here, then here I have users, and I have this table of users, and it has all these attributes. Now, if I created an admin user, then essentially what I would be doing is, if I did this manually, would be to be doing something like this. And I'd be saying admin, users, and pretty much all of these items would all be identical. So the problem with this is I have a ton of duplicate code. And when we get into building tests, I'm gonna have a bunch of bad tests, and it's just a really bad way of building the feature. So I'm gonna get out of this. We don't ever typically want to make any changes to our schema file, so don't save any changes there. And to do this, I'm going to actually use object-oriented inheritance in order to have admin users essentially share the same table as user. And so to do that, I can come up to models, and then for user, or in models, I can create a new file here called admin_user.rb. Now, if you click on user, you can see that user inherits from active record base, and the other models we're going to create would all inherit from active record base. But what we're going to do is actually create an admin user. Make sure to name it this way. To follow Rails conventions, you need to name it this way, or else the file name doesn't match and you'll run into problems. And so I'm going to say that this inherits from user. So by doing this, what we can now do is create users that will be of type admin user. And so let me show you how this works. So let's open up a Rails console session, but I'm going to open it up in sandbox mode. And I forget if it's been a while since I've used sandbox. Let's see. So I believe that's the right syntax. It's opening up. No, and it's not. Let me see. Is it? Maybe it's 2 dots or 2 dashes. Usually I'm opening the Rails console up just normally, but there you go. Yep, so that worked. So what sandbox mode is it lets you revert back, or it automatically reverts back. So if we create any records in the database, it's actually going to pull them out and delete them after we're done. So because we may have some data validation errors and things like that that we don't want in our development database. So I'm going to say user.create and pass in the things I know are required, like email. So I'm going to say test@test.com. and do a password of ASDF, do a password confirmation of ASDF, and that should be all that's required right now. Yes, so that worked, and if I do user.last, you can see that that created that user. Now, what I can do is if I do admin user.create with an exclamation mark, and actually, you don't want to watch me type all this again. Let me just say admin user, if I can learn how to spell correctly. There you go. Admin user.create, and I'm just going to say admin test. Everything else can be the same. Yes. So if I hit return, Now that worked. Now there's something really interesting about this user. So notice that we don't have, if we open up the schema file, we don't have an admin user here. We just have the users table. But if I do user.last, you can see that the admin user, even though it shows that it's the class object of admin user, it's showing up in our users table, and that's what we want. So it's sharing the table even though it's of a different type. And so if I do admin user.last, it also lets me do that. And all of this is accomplished through the magic of this value right here. See how I have type? This type is, I noted earlier that we're going to come to this, so now we're coming to it. You need to have type as an attribute in any table that you want to use single table inheritance for, and I'll show you why right here. So say that I store this user in a variable. So if I do this and then do admin user.last, now I can do type, and you can see it's of type admin user. If I do user first type, you can see that it's nil because nothing was set inside of there. So what this type value does with single table inheritance is it lets you essentially set the type, and this is where it controls everything. So when we create a new admin user, it looks up to see the parent class, and it says, oh, there's a parent class. It's not inheriting from active record base, and so it sets the type equal to whatever that class name is. So now that we have that, we'll have the ability to have two different types of users, and you'll see how important this is when we get into working in the admin dashboard, where it separates the user type out, and so it works very nicely. And this is considered the best way of implementing a different admin user type, or really any type. So say you had a newspaper application and you wanted to have user types of editor and reader and owner or anything like that. You don't want to create tables for each one of them. That's considered an anti-pattern in Rails. Instead, you can use single table inheritance to stretch out that one table and be able to use it for multiple purposes. So let's save this. I'm going to say implemented single table inheritance for admin user. Push it up. And now that we have this, I'm going to, in the next video, walk through how to implement some RSpec validations and go through some automated test processes so that we know that all of our elements are fully tested and we're able to have confidence when we're building them. So I'll see you in the next video.